My name is Dorothy. I'm 67 years old, a widow, and for the past 4 decades, my life has been anchored by a piece of property tucked along the shore of Lake Michigan. My late husband, David, and I built this lake house back when we had more ambition than money. We put every spare dollar and weekend into framing the walls, laying the pine floors, and building a wide wraparound porch overlooking the water. David passed away 6 years ago, but his presence still lived in every timber of this home. To the outside world, it was a prime piece of lakeside real estate worth a considerable sum on the current market. To me, it was never an investment vehicle or an asset to be liquidated. It was the heart of our family. Since David's passing, I stayed in this house alone, maintaining the grounds and keeping our family traditions alive. The quiet never felt heavy because every weekend the house filled up with the sound of warm laughter. My 2 grandchildren, 10-year-old Toby and 8-year-old Chloe, spent almost every Saturday and Sunday with me. They were the center of my world, and teaching them the simple, meaningful traditions of life became my primary purpose in my golden years. Every Saturday morning began early on the wooden dock down by the water. I taught Toby and Chloe how to bait a hook, cast a fishing line, and patiently wait for the bobber to dip beneath the surface. Patience is a discipline, kids, I told them, as we sat side by side on the warm wood. You don't rush the lake, and you don't rush life. Toby loved the quiet focus of fishing, while Chloe was always eager for the baking session that followed our morning on the water. By early afternoon, we moved the lessons into the kitchen. My grandmother had taught me how to make an authentic American apple pie from scratch, and I passed that exact recipe down to my grandchildren. We'd roll out the pastry dough together, slice crisp Granny Smith apples, and season them with cinnamon and nutmeg. Always measure the flour carefully, Chloe recited proudly as she dusted the wooden board, while Toby carefully arranged the lattice crust over the top. The warm, rich scent of baking apples filled the house, creating memories I knew they would carry for the rest of their lives. During those quiet late afternoons, as we waited for the pie to cool on the counter, we'd sit on the porch. I listened to their school stories, their little worries, and their big dreams. "Grandma," Toby asked one afternoon, looking out at the water, "will this place always be here for us?" I placed my hand on his shoulder and looked him in the eyes. "As long as I am standing, Toby, this house belongs to this family," I answered firmly. "It is your sanctuary, now and forever." I meant every single word. I was building a haven for them, a place where they felt safe, loved, and rooted in something permanent. I worked hard over the years to ensure this property was fully paid off, free of any debt, and meticulously maintained. I knew the full financial value of what David and I had created, but to me, its real worth was measured in emotional security. My son, Richard, had grown up here, but as he entered adulthood, he became distant, consumed by corporate ambitions and financial pressures. Still, I took comfort in knowing that his children were forming the same deep connection to this land that their father once had. I had no intention of ever selling, mortgaging, or handing over control of this estate to anyone. It was meant to be passed down intact to the next generation when the time was right. But peace in a family rarely survives when high-value real estate is at stake. I didn't realize it then, but my quiet weekends with Toby and Chloe were about to become the target of an aggressive, calculated takeover. A storm was brewing, and it was heading straight for my front door. The peaceful atmosphere of the lake house began to shift 3 months ago, right after my daughter-in-law, Amanda, launched her upscale real estate venture. Amanda was always a woman driven by status and material metrics. She saw everything through the lens of leverage, return on investment, and social standing. To her, my unencumbered lake house was not a cherished sanctuary where her children spent their weekends. It was an underutilized asset sitting on millions of dollars of equity. She began dropping subtle hints during family dinners, commenting on how much the property value had skyrocketed in our area. But hints quickly turned into direct, relentless pressure. The real shift happened on a Tuesday evening when Amanda and my son Richard drove out to the lake house without the kids. The moment they stepped into my living room, I could sense the calculated tension in the air. Amanda was carrying a heavy leather binder, and her posture was stiff and businesslike. She didn't waste time with small talk. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, opened the binder, and pushed a set of financial documents across the polished lid. "Dorothy, we need to talk about the long-term financial strategy for this family," Amanda declared, her tone sharp and devoid of warmth. "Your home equity is completely dead weight right now. We are expanding my luxury boutique firm, and we need substantial capital to secure our next development project." I looked down at the documents. It was a formal proposal demanding that I either take out a massive line of credit against the lake house or transfer the property deed directly into her limited liability company. "You want me to mortgage my home to fund your commercial expansion?" I asked, looking her dead in the eye. "It's not just my expansion, Dorothy," Amanda replied coolly, crossing her arms. "It's an investment in your grandchildren's future. Leaving a prime property sitting here debt-free without taking advantage of its market power is financial negligence. If you sign the deed over to our firm, we can leverage it, double our capital, and guarantee a much bigger legacy for Toby and Chloe." I turned my gaze toward my son. Richard sat next to her, staring fixedly at his hands, avoiding all eye contact with me. "Richard," I said softly, but with deliberate weight, "this is your father's legacy. This is where your children are growing up. Do you honestly agree with risking this house for a speculative venture?" Richard cleared his throat, unable to meet my eyes. "Mom, Amanda knows the market," he mumbled weakly, clearly reading from a script his wife had rehearsed with him. "She says it's a smart risk. We just need you to be reasonable and cooperate with the plan. It benefits everyone in the end." Hearing my own son back down like a coward was far more disappointing than Amanda's blatant arrogance. Richard had always been conflict-averse, but seeing him sacrifice his family's peace to appease his wife's greed was painful to watch. He was entirely under her thumb, choosing submission over honor. I slid the binder back across the table toward Amanda. My voice remained steady, calm, and completely unshakable. "The answer is no, Amanda," I said firmly. "This home is fully paid for, and it will stay that way. I will not put a mortgage on it, nor will I transfer the deed to your company. This house is meant for Toby and Chloe's future, not your business ventures." Amanda's polished smile vanished instantly, replaced by a cold, sharp sneer. "You're being selfish, Dorothy," she snapped, standing up from the table. "You're holding this family back out of sentimentality. But make no mistake, I am not going to let your pride ruin our future." She snapped her binder shut and stormed out to the car. Richard gave me a quick, guilty glance before following her into the night. I stood by the window, watching their taillights disappear down the driveway. I knew Amanda wasn't used to hearing the word no. She wasn't going to let this go, and I needed to prepare myself for whatever low move she made next. The rejection at my kitchen table didn't end Amanda's ambition. It merely accelerated her cruelty. 3 days later, Friday afternoon rolled around, the time when Toby and Chloe usually packed their bags to spend the weekend with me at the lake. I had already bought fresh apples for our pie and set the fishing rods by the back porch, but by 5 o'clock, their car hadn't pulled into the driveway. Instead, my phone rang. I picked it up, expecting Richard's voice, but it was Amanda on the speakerphone. Her tone was no longer cold and businesslike. It was coated in triumph. "Dorothy," she began, skipping any polite greeting, "I'm calling to update you on our weekend schedule. The kids won't be coming over today. In fact, they won't be coming over for the foreseeable future." I kept my composure, holding the phone firmly. "What are you talking about, Amanda? We have our routine. The children are expecting to be here." "Routines change," Amanda replied smoothly. "Richard and I have decided that until you demonstrate that you actually care about this family's financial security, we need to restructure our priorities. If you can't support our business goals with your property, then you clearly don't respect our authority as parents. Until that deed is signed over or leveraged, you are cut off. No weekend visits, no phone calls, no holidays, nothing. A heavy silence hung in the air. I could hear Richard breathing in the background, sitting right beside her, saying absolutely nothing to defend his own mother or his children's happiness. He was letting his wife use his children as human bargaining chips. "Are you putting Richard on the line, Amanda?" I asked, keeping my voice dead even.
"He agrees with me completely," she said, though Richard remained dead silent. "The choice is yours, Dorothy. Hand over control of the lake house or kiss your relationship with your grandchildren goodbye. Let's see how much you love that old house when you're sitting in it completely alone." She hung up before I could respond. The line went dead, and for a moment, the quiet in my living room felt overwhelming. A sharp sting of grief hit my chest. Weaponizing innocent children to force a property transfer was a level of malice I hadn't fully anticipated. She knew Toby and Chloe were my weak spot. She expected me to break, to cry, to call her back begging for mercy, and eventually sign whatever paper she put in front of me out of sheer desperation. If I were a different woman, I might have driven straight to their house, pounded on the door, and created an emotional scene. But throwing a frantic tantrum is exactly what a manipulator wants. It gives them control. I took a deep breath, walked out to the porch, and looked out across the quiet blue water of the lake. Amanda thought she was playing a short game of brute intimidation. She assumed my sentimentality made me weak. What she failed to realize was that 4 decades of living, working, and building a life with David had taught me how to navigate storms with patience and precision. You don't fight a ruthless predator with tears. You fight them with unstoppable structure.
I refused to give her the satisfaction of a panicked phone call. I wasn't going to yell, and I certainly wasn't going to surrender my home. Instead, I opened my desk drawer, pulled out my address book, and searched for a specific phone number. It was time to stop dealing with greedy family members and start dealing with high-level legal reality. Amanda wanted a war over this property. I was going to give her one, but it was going to be fought on my terms, under the strict protection of the law. I picked up the phone and dialed my attorney.
First thing Monday morning, I walked into the downtown office of Arthur Vance, my estate planning attorney and a trusted family friend for over 20 years. Arthur was sharp, seasoned, and deeply familiar with Michigan property law and asset protection. He greeted me with a warm smile, but as soon as I sat across his broad oak desk, his expression turned strictly professional. "Dorothy, it's good to see you, though I get the feeling this isn't a casual visit," Arthur said, leaning forward. "It isn't, Arthur," I replied, keeping my voice firm and my composure intact. "I need to secure my lake house permanently. My daughter-in-law is trying to force a mortgage on the property to fund her speculative real estate business, and my son is enabling her. They're using my grandchildren as emotional leverage against me. I want to lock this house down so tight that no one can ever touch it, leverage it, or steal it out from under my family." Arthur nodded slowly, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "If you want absolute protection against family pressure, predatory claims, or future bad financial decisions, a standard will won't cut it. You need an irrevocable trust." "Explain how it works," I said directly. "An irrevocable trust removes the property from your personal estate entirely," Arthur explained, pointing his pen at the paper. "Once we transfer the deed into the trust, you no longer personally own it on paper, which means no one can bully you into signing it away.
You retain full lifetime rights to reside there undisturbed, but the title is locked permanently." "Good," I said. "Here are my non-negotiable conditions." First, I instructed Arthur to designate my grandchildren, Toby and Chloe, as the sole beneficiaries of the lake house. They would receive full legal ownership in equal shares only when the youngest reached 25 years of age. That guaranteed they would be mature enough to understand its true worth and protect it. Second, I stripped Richard and Amanda of any potential oversight or financial control. I explicitly appointed an independent financial institution, First National Bank's Trust Department, as the sole corporate trustee. This meant neither my son nor his wife would ever have administrative power, power of attorney, management authority, or access to any equity generated by the estate. If anything happened to me, a cold, unyielding bank officer would manage the property, making them completely immune to Amanda's emotional manipulation, corporate demands, or high-pressure legal threats. Finally, I added a specific legal clause aimed directly at Amanda. I want a strict trespassing clause written into the core trust terms, I told Arthur, my tone unwavering. Effective immediately upon execution, Amanda is legally prohibited from entering or standing anywhere on the property grounds. If she sets foot on the land, the corporate trustee is legally mandated to file formal criminal trespassing charges with local law enforcement. Arthur looked up, a sharp glint of professional respect in his eyes. That is an airtight defense, Dorothy. Once you sign these papers, it is legally stone-clad. They can scream, threaten, or attempt to sue, but no court in this state will overturn an irrevocable trust created by a competent owner. Are you ready to execute this? Place the documents in front of me, I said without a second of hesitation. I am playing the long game. By Thursday afternoon, the legal machinery was fully complete. The new deed was officially recorded, the irrevocable trust was registered at the county courthouse, and the strict non-trespassing directive was legally binding. Amanda thought she had backed me into a corner by holding my grandchildren hostage. She believed my age and my deep sentimentality made me weak and predictable. She had no idea that I had just built an impenetrable legal fortress around our family legacy, and I was about to invite her directly into the trap. On Friday morning, I called Richard's phone, knowing Amanda would be listening in on speaker. I kept my voice soft and slightly hesitant, playing the exact role Amanda expected of a desperate, heartbroken grandmother. "Richard," I said, letting a heavy pause linger over the line. "I've been thinking about what Amanda said all week. The quiet here without the kids is intolerable. I want us to sit down together at the lake house this Sunday evening for dinner, so we can resolve this entire matter once and for all. Please bring your paperwork." I heard a sharp, triumphant intake of breath from Amanda before she quickly took over the call. "I knew you'd see reason eventually, Dorothy," Amanda said, her voice dripping with condescension and smug satisfaction. "It's about time you put family stability over stubborn pride. We'll be there at 6 sharp with the deed transfer forms and the equity release agreement. Make sure your pen is ready." "I will have everything prepared," I replied calmly, and hung up the phone. She had taken the bait hook, line, and sinker. Amanda's massive ego had blinded her completely. She genuinely believed that weaponizing my grandchildren had shattered my resolve and forced me into complete submission. She had no idea she was walking straight into a legal trap. Immediately after hanging up, I called my attorney. "Arthur, the meeting is set for Sunday at 6, I told him. "I need you at the house by 5:30, fully armed with the recorded irrevocable trust documents, the new property deed, and the official legal non-trespassing directive." "I'll be there, Dorothy," Arthur assured me with a dry chuckle. I wouldn't miss this meeting for the world. Sunday afternoon arrived. I didn't spend the day agonizing over the impending confrontation. Instead, I set the dining room table with my finest linen and china, ensuring every detail projected absolute stability and order. At 5:30, Arthur arrived, wearing his dark suit and carrying a heavy black leather briefcase. He took a seat in my home office just off the dining room, waiting quietly for his cue. At precisely 6 o'clock, tires crunched on the gravel driveway. I watched from the window as Amanda stepped out of their vehicle, wearing a sharp corporate outfit, holding a thick leather folder like a championship trophy. Richard followed behind her, looking nervous and deeply uncomfortable. They walked up the porch steps, the very porch David and I had built with our own hands, with the arrogant posture of conquerors arriving to collect their prize. I opened the front door before they could knock. "Good evening," I said with a serene smile, stepping aside to welcome them into the foyer. Amanda marched inside with her chin high, scanning the room as if assessing her new asset. "It smells delicious, Dorothy," she said with false warmth. "I'm glad to see you're finally being sensible. let's skip dinner for a moment and get right down to business so we can get this signing out of the way. We walked into the dining room. Amanda unzipped her folder and slapped her legal papers onto the table. All you need to do is sign on the marked lines, Dorothy, Amanda declared, handing me a pen with a triumphant smile.
Once this is notarized tomorrow morning, the kids will be back here next weekend, and we can move past this. I looked down at the pen, then raised my eyes to look Amanda directly in the face. My expression remained entirely calm and unbothered. Amanda, I said softly, before I sign anything, there is someone else who needs to explain how this property is going to be handled from this day forward. I turned toward the home office door. Arthur, please come in. Amanda's confident smile froze instantly as the office door opened and Arthur Vance stepped out into the dining room, placing his own heavy stack of registered legal documents squarely on the table next to her useless papers. Arthur Vance pulled out his chair and sat down at the head of the table. Good evening, Amanda, Richard. I am Arthur Vance, Dorothy's legal counsel. Amanda stared at Arthur, her triumphant expression instantly souring into a glare of intense suspicion. What is he doing here, Dorothy? We had an agreement. We came here to sign our corporate paperwork, not to talk to your attorney. You came here to discuss the future of this property, Amanda, I replied, sitting down opposite her. Arthur is here to explain precisely how that future has already been settled. Arthur opened his leather binder and slid a copy of a bound document across the table toward Amanda. This is a copy of the Dorothy M. Miller Irrevocable Trust, fully executed and recorded with the county clerk as of yesterday afternoon. As of this moment, Dorothy no longer personally owns the lake house, nor do you or your husband have any legal claim to it whatsoever. Amanda snatched the document, frantically turning the pages. Her face went pale as her eyes scanned the legal terms. What is this nonsense? Irrevocable? No, this is invalid. We are her immediate family. Richard is her only son. And Richard is completely excluded from any managerial or financial control of this asset, Arthur interrupted crisply. The title of this property has been transferred directly into the trust. The sole beneficiaries are Toby and Chloe, who will take equal, unencumbered ownership when the youngest turns 25 years old. 25? Amanda shrieked, slamming her hand down on the table. That's 15 years away. Who manages the equity until then? We can manage it through my firm. You will manage nothing, Arthur stated with razor-sharp authority. Dorothy has appointed First National Bank's Corporate Trust Division as the sole trustee. Neither you nor Richard will ever have access to the equity, rent, leverage, or administration of this estate. The bank operates under strict fiduciary duties to protect the property for the children. Your business proposal, Amanda, is legally dead. The color drained entirely from Amanda's face. She turned on my son, her voice screeching with panic and fury. Richard, do something. Say something to your mother. She just stole our entire financial future. Richard stood there, stammering, his face red with shame. Mom, you can't be serious. You locked us out completely? You locked yourselves out the moment you decided to use my grandchildren as ransom, Richard, I said, looking him dead in the eye with uncompromising strength. You chose to stand behind your wife's greed instead of standing up for your own family. This is outrageously illegal, Amanda screamed, shoving the papers back across the table. I'm going to challenge this trust. I'll sue you for everything you're worth, Dorothy. I will make sure you never see Toby and Chloe ever again. Arthur slowly reached into his briefcase and produced a final, sealed white envelope, sliding it directly in front of Amanda. You are welcome to spend your own money attempting to challenge an irrevocable trust, Amanda, but before you make any threats, you need to read that notice. Amanda stared at the envelope, her fingers trembling slightly. What is this? That is a formal notice of no trespassing, drafted on behalf of the corporate trustee, Arthur said, his voice dropping into a stern, icy tone. Per the explicit, mandatory provisions of the trust,
You are legally barred from setting foot on this property, effective immediately." Amanda gasped, looking at the letter in sheer horror. "If you step onto this land, cross the driveway, or enter this home again," Arthur continued, "the trustee is legally obligated to immediately dispatch the county sheriff and file formal charges against you for criminal trespassing. This property is no longer a family home you can harass. It is a legally protected commercial trust asset." "You're banning me?" Amanda sputtered, her voice cracking as her pride shattered into pieces. "I am protecting my legacy," I corrected her, standing up gracefully. "Your business meeting is over, Amanda. Please leave my property before Arthur calls for sheriff." Amanda stood paralyzed for a moment, her eyes darting between the trespassing notice and Arthur's cold, unflinching gaze.
The mask of an arrogant, high-powered real estate mogul had completely shattered, leaving behind a bitter, desperate woman who had gambled her family's peace and lost everything. Without saying another word, she grabbed her useless folder, spun on her heel, and stormed out into the night. The heavy front door slammed shut behind her, echoing through the quiet halls of the lake house. Richard remained standing in the dining room, looking small, defeated, and thoroughly broken. The reality of his cowardice had finally caught up with him. He had sacrificed his mother's trust, his children's peace, and his own self-respect to appease a wife who had just been dismantled by a few sheets of legal paper. "Mom," Richard choked out, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I didn't think it would go this far." "You didn't think at all, Richard," I replied, keeping my voice quiet but unyielding. "You let her use your own children as leverage against the woman who raised you. You allowed greed to dictate your honor. That is something a piece of paper cannot fix." He swallowed hard, unable to offer a single defense. "What do we do now?" "You go home," I said simply. "You reevaluate what kind of father and husband you want to be, and if you ever want to repair your relationship with me, you will start by standing on your own 2 feet." Richard bowed his head, turned slowly, and walked out the door, the sound of his heavy footsteps fading into the quiet evening air. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects of that evening tore through Amanda's carefully constructed world. Without the equity of my lake house to back her speculative expansion, her luxury real estate project collapsed before it even began. Her investors pulled out, and rumors of her reckless financial maneuvers spread quickly through the local business community. She was left saddled with debt and a ruined professional reputation, a victim of her own unquenchable greed. Richard, faced with the stark reality of his wife's ruin and his own passivity, finally found a shred of backbone. Realizing that keeping Toby and Chloe away from me no longer provided any financial leverage, he put his foot down for the first time in his marriage. He made it clear to Amanda that if she continued to weaponize their children, he would file for divorce and seek full custody. 2 Saturdays later, a familiar car pulled up the gravel driveway. Richard stayed in the driver's seat at the edge of the property line, obeying the law, while Toby and Chloe bounded out of the back door and ran straight across the lawn toward the porch. Their laughter echoed across the water, filling the house with life once again. We spent that afternoon out on the dock, casting lines in the quiet sunlight and baking a fresh apple pie in the kitchen. Amanda's attempt to sever our bond had failed entirely. By Sunday evening, after the children had gone home, the lake house returned to its gentle, serene rhythm. I walked out onto the wraparound porch carrying a steaming cup of tea and sat down in the wooden rocking chair David had built for me decades ago. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of gold and violet across Lake Michigan. In the business world Amanda worshipped, people always look for quick wins and loud victories. But life isn't a short sprint. It's a long game built on patience, principle, and strength. I had defended my home without ever raising my voice or compromising my dignity. The lake house was safe, my late husband's legacy was secured, and my grandchildren's future was locked behind an unshakable legal fortress. I took a slow sip of my tea, feeling the cool evening breeze off the water, perfectly at peace.